You know, a kid that's really ill, they're going through a divorce. So many things going on for people when they're just so stressed about things. I was in LA during the fires Tuesday and Wednesday, and a bunch of my friends lost their homes in Malibu and in Pacific Palisades, and brutal. I mean, it's 60 miles. It's the size of Paris that's just gone.
Decimated.
But what's interesting is, you know, when you're in those environments, when you're able to do things within yourself, my own home burned down. I said to him, look, you know, my home burned down, it was years before. I said, I was angry, I was sad, I had all these feelings, but I had 3 kids there. I realized I need to set the example for them what's possible, and I have to discipline my disappointment. And so I realized I lost things. A lot of those things I cherish because they're memories, but they're still things. Things are replaceable. Family's not. People are not. What people don't realize is oldest human story is the hero's journey, right? Every culture has it. What is the hero's journey? Your life is ordinary, meaning what you're used to. And then something comes along, it disrupts it massively. Your place burns down. Someone in your family has cancer. I was told I had a tumor in my brain at one point. Somebody dies, you get robbed. I mean, I don't care how smart you are, how beautiful you are, how spiritual you are, how rich you are, you're gonna have extreme stress at some point. But what I've learned is, if you can manage through that, what it is really a call to a new life. I would never left the Del Mar Castle. It was a home I built from castles in Europe, an absolute place for my family. But because it was disrupted, I went on the journey of uncertainty. We built a new home because we had to. We met new people. I met some new mentors. I made some new decisions. I fought some new battles. And eventually, if you grow, you slay the dragon, you come home the hero of your life, and you have something to give other people. It's not book knowledge, it's real. And then as soon as you get comfortable, it comes again. I don't care how well you're doing, right? It never stops. If you're having extreme stress, corny as it sounds, the first key is you're going through hell, keep going. But if you make it through extreme stress, and you get to the other side, you learn 3 things. You learn, number 1, just how strong you really are. You don't realize how strong you are until you're tested. And then secondly, you find out who your real friends are. Not your Facebook friends, right? Because they're the ones that show up.
I've been through that a few times.
We all have, right? And then thirdly, you get like an immunity to future challenges. Because like I had a friend that was locked up in North Vietnam for 7 years on a slab where they chained him to the ground, and you got to go to the bathroom, and it ran down his back and burned his back. I remember years later, the IRS was doing something really ridiculous. It took him 3 years to unwind it. They were wrong. He won, but it was really painful. And he was barely even stressed. I was like, how come this goes? If the North Vietnamese can't get me, he said, after that, nothing can. Life is always happening for a reason, a higher purpose, but it's our job to find that purpose. In other words, life's happening for me, not to me. It looks like it's happening to me, but it's my job to figure out it's happening for me. So I look back on my childhood, that was for me. It didn't look like it, didn't feel like it. I look at my father, that was for me.
What you're saying, that, I mean, obviously changing people's perception and trying to get their mindset different. In all your events that you give, like, you know, for that day, that they're there, the hour, the weekend, the week, whatever it is, they're excited. They're around an environment that's really helping generate that transformation out of their comfort zone, right? Yeah. How do you really create this atmosphere to really get them to make it a long-lasting transformation? How does that happen?
Well, it's interesting because people think it's going to be a pump up and so forth. And certainly, I've never been a motivator. I've always been a strategist, but I do know you need energy to follow through. You know, you can have the best tools in the world, but if you're low energy, you're not going to use them, right? So people see me in an audience with 20,000 people and they're going crazy and like, oh, it's a motivational seminar. I don't need motivation. You don't need a motivation, but you do need to tap into what drives you. And everybody is motivated. You might be motivated to eat, right? You know, so that's why you're overweight. So it's finding that inner drive. Well, what I do is a conditioning process. So like you understand how the nervous system works. And so that's why I've gotten results for some of the greatest athletes, business people, et cetera, that last. But what's interesting is I always knew what it was. But during COVID, if you can imagine, I'm used to doing stadiums, 15, 20,000 people. And you know, they shut down London, they shut down LA, they shut down everything. I went and built a studio, and then I was like, okay, I'll reach people in their homes. I would never do that normally because I'm used to a rock and roll concert, but I got to find a way to help people when they're needed. I go to do this, and I start to create these results, and I was like, wow, this really works. So then Stanford comes, and they call me up one day. This is right before COVID and then during COVID. They said, look, you know, we had 2 of our professors who were clinically depressed who came to your Date with Destiny seminar the 6 days. They're both off all medication. They're both fine. This is pretty miraculous. Do you have any studies? And I said, well, I've got millions of graduates and testimonials and so forth. And they said, no. I have my documentary, if your audience wants to see it, on Netflix called Tony Robbins, I'm Not Your Guru.
Yes, I have.
And then what we do there is you see me doing this seminar, for about an hour and a half of what normally is 6 days. But you see the people that are suicidal, and then we follow up, and you see them 5 years later, or you see somebody that couldn't have a kid, or you see all the changes lasting because it's in their nervous system. But here's what's interesting. Stanford says, well, what if we did a study? I said, great. What do you want to study? They said depression, because now COVID's starting to hit. And they said, depression's out of control. People are overdosing on drugs right now like crazy. Suicides are through the roof. And we're looking for an interesting non-pharmaceutical approach to doing this. We'd love to study it. I said, great. What's the meta-study show? Multiple studies. What's the average result? And they said 60% of the people who come for therapy and or drugs, meaning psychiatry, the Prozac, Zoloft, whatever, 60% make zero improvement in their side effects. Zero.
And they're taking drugs in their system, and they're being...
There's all the side effects, including some of the side effects are suicidal thoughts, right? It's just crazy. He said 40% improve, and the average improvement is 50%. So they're half as depressed. Some people get well, but most of them are on drugs forever. And I said, well, I know it sounds like hubris, but I think we can blow past that result just based on our history. And more importantly, I think you can do that with almost a placebo. And he kind of had a nervous laugh and said, maybe. And I said, what's the best result you've ever seen? Because I'd like to beat that. And he said, well, the best was done 5 years ago at Johns Hopkins. They gave people 30 days of psilocybin, magic mushrooms, and cognitive therapy for a month. I said, dude, you'd have to get a massive change in somebody's brain for that. He said, it is the biggest change in the history of psychiatry. 6 weeks after the treatment.
It's a lasting transformation.
Well, 6 weeks later, 54% had no symptoms whatsoever. There's nothing like it.
And it lasted. It changed.
They didn't measure them a year later or anything else. It just 6 weeks. I know it sounds like hubris. I know it sounds like overconfidence, but I'm just based on history. I bet we'll beat that sizably, but let's see. So they set up the test group, the comparison group, just like they did the Johns Hopkins study. And then they did it. No drugs, 6 days, no one-on-one therapy. At the end of 6 weeks, 93% of them had absolutely no symptoms, nothing like it in the history of psychiatry. The 7% that didn't completely solve improved massively. 17% came in with suicidal ideation, constantly thinking about suicide. No suicidal ideation afterwards. And 1 year follow-up showed, at the end of a year, never seeing me again, because of the way they were conditioned, these people had 72% reduction in negative emotions, 51% increase in positive emotions.
So the big question is why is this not being done? Why aren't they? Okay, I'm not saying go out and do psilocybin every day, but I mean, there has to be some microdosing. I don't know what it is, but something. If it's that successful, why aren't they promoting this?
Well, the current government, as we know, Bobby Kennedy is in there, and now you got Dr. Oz, who's going to head up, Obamacare, and you've got
current as of the new transformation.
The new transformation here. As long assuming they get approved. Yeah. These are all people that during COVID were telling people different than what we were being told. The lies were being told, so they're in charge. But right now we have a sick care system where the insurance companies, if you study what happens, they don't really want the surgeon most of the time. They want the drugs that they can sell you forever. I'm not being harsh. It's just that's reality.